Texas, Washington, New Year's Day, 8:45 Eastern, ESPN in New Orleans, all right? Caesar Superdome, it's going to be a movie. We talked about the way that Bama and Michigan's going to play out, kind of two iconic brands, iconic background. This one, to me, feels a little bit more new age. Washington is a little bit more of a modern kind of feel to it. Texas, also kind of the new Texas. We talked about that a lot. For Washington, I want to make sure we say this, because we've said it all season long. I want to make sure we get it in this preview video, because a lot of y'all are going to see this. This is not TCU. They might have the same color scheme. They might have had a similar finish to their season with having to win some close games. To be clear, Washington actually won their conference. TCU did not a season ago. Washington is better across the board. Better quarterback play, better skill players, better in the trenches. They are not TCU from last year. So let's make sure we get that thing straight. There is zero flinch across the board. Watching them, they might be the most poised team in college football. I mean, listening to Michael Penix Jr. talk after the Pac-12 title game, dude looked bored. Well, he was just having a normal day at the office, talking to somebody after his work day. Just won the Pac-12 title game, punched a ticket to the college football playoff, and he just looked like he was having again, normal day at the office. Same thing with Kalen DeBoer. Zero flinch for them. I expect nothing less in a spot like this. For Texas, this is new Texas. Favored by 4 points in this game, and they've worked to get back to a point like this where the brand is at a point where it's nationally recognized and nationally taken seriously. Regardless of what happens in this game, I think you got to feel really good about the future on the 40 acres under Steve Sarkisian. Because remember when he took it over? First year, they're 5-7. You got the Bo Davis rant on the bus. We're talking about the dysfunction that Texas is. They go 8-4 last season. 8-5, actually, counting this loss to Washington in the Alamo Bowl. We'll talk about that here in a second. But Texas has arrived at a new spot. And this, to me, them being in this game is confirmation they are on a new playing field in the college football world. There's no more underachieving Texas, underdeveloping Texas. That's not this team. And I don't think we see that in a game like this. I think both these teams will bring their best. We talk about consistency for Washington and for Texas across the landscape of this past season. I think in this game, we see the best version of both. So how does that shake out? Well, we saw a version of this game a season ago in the Alamo Bowl. I think both teams are different from then, just to make sure we're on the same page. When we talk about breaking down this game, it feels a lot like you got to use the video game lens, like playing NCAA 14 with your boy back in the day. God bless him. We get a new game here very, very soon. Fingers crossed. When we break down this game, we talk about the video game effect. How would those games go with your boy? Was it a defensive grudge match? Probably not. Probably wasn't a back and forth in that sense. The over-under here, I believe, is at 64.5. Right now, I lean towards the over. I think this will be a game where both teams are scoring a ton of points. It might come down to who has the ball last. That was probably how it went when you and your boy were playing NCAA back in the day. Both teams are scoring 35 points a game or more. Dynamic offenses. To make matters worse, both secondaries aren't quite as elite as the offensive side of the ball is for these teams. Both giving up over 240 yards a game. So what happens then? What happens when you get into a shootout? Well, I think when we think about those games we played with our buddy in NCAA, it came down to a couple of things, and one of which being who is able to shift gears the best. Maybe a better question is, who gets to shift gears in a spot like this? Dylan Johnson against these Texas trenches and the Texas running back committee against Washington. I think if you're able to get leverage, especially late in the game, you're going to need to slow it down. Because the last thing you want to do if you're up by 7 in the fourth quarter is give Michael Penix Jr. the ball back or give Quinn Ewers the ball back, especially by nature of the way that this game goes. I think both can run the ball. Who gets to run the ball is my big question. Now, to be clear, Texas, their run defense, top 5 in the country. Washington, they haven't been tremendous stopping the run, but they've been decent enough. Texas, to be clear, made more of an effort to run the football this season. C.J. Baxter is the guy who I expect to carry the majority of the load in this ball game. Right now, Texas is somewhere in the range of 190 yards a game on the ground. That's great, but are you able to take advantage of that to the nth degree because you're not having to chase Washington being down by 10 points or more? I'm just saying, that's the big question here. Dylan Johnson averaging 6 yards a carry against ranked opponents. A lot of talk around them being TCU and them being this, deep ball kind of football team, and they definitely are a deep ball kind of football team. We'll talk about Michael Penix Jr. here a little bit more in a second, but what I saw against Oregon, who's also one of the best run-stopping teams in the country, Dylan Johnson just went to work. Showed his SEC background, having been at Mississippi State, ran for over 100 yards. Like, they made a point to pound the rock, and they did it really effectively against a really good Oregon front. If they can do that again in this spot, I think that changes the level of margin they have to play with offensively. Because I think when you look at Washington, one of my questions is, how much do you depend on Michael Penix Jr.? As much as they did running the football against Oregon, they're still a pass-first team, throwing the ball 57% of the time. One of the best in the country. One of the highest rates in the country, rather, I should say. Rome Odunze is an NFL wide receiver. Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, NFL wide receivers. They're needing to get theirs, but anytime you live by the sword, you also die by the sword. So if we're taking shots deep and we're connecting, that's great, but if we're not, find ourselves in 2nd and 10. Heck, maybe find ourselves in 3rd and 7. And at that point, the pressure dials up a little bit more on Michael Penix Jr. Now, my question here for Texas, can they get pressure with 4? Because Oregon, they really did a lot to try and, as Dan Lanning put it, change the picture against Washington. Tried to bring a blitz from a different spot, tried to heat them up. And I love the idea, but to be honest, like, anytime you give less numbers on the back end against Michael Penix Jr., he's going to find it. He's going to find it. And when he does find it, he's going to exploit it for a big play. And Texas, we talked about the secondary. They're already not great on the back end. Pretty good in that front 7. If they can get a push in that pocket and speed him up at that level, good things will happen for Texas. Because at that point, you're able to apply pressure, speed up the shot clock, but more importantly, you have all of your resources on the back end that you're going to need to defend the monstars that are the Washington wide receiver corps. Now, my question for Texas, they're going to be aggressive. Going to be extremely aggressive, and the story for them is consistent across the board. They are so multiple throwing the football. It really is pick your poison. Jatavian Sanders. I said it yesterday. I think he's the best tight end playing college football that's not named Brock Bowers. Stand by that statement. Xavier Worthy will be an all-everything weapon for them in this game. Adonai Mitchell, I don't know if we talked about him yet, but if we haven't, we will talk about him when it comes to this game. If I'm Washington, I don't worry about defending the entire field. I don't worry about taking away each and every guy. My question is, can you take away one? Can you take away one? Because Jabbar Muhammad, corner for Washington, was phenomenal in that Pac-12 title game. Took away Troy Franklin. He had 9 targets, 4 catches, less than 40 yards receiving. Like, that was a big thing for Oregon in that game, not having their explosive weapon like that. Good news for Texas is, if you take away one guy, they still have other guys that can hurt you. But I think for Washington, you have to just try and take away one of these options and then do your best on the rest. Because going back to the NCAA 14 metaphor here, breaking down this game, who else would win that football game when y'all were trading scores back and forth, the games in the 40s? It's a matter of who gets the ball last. The individual that won the football game, the video game rather, probably was able to make that big turnover at some point in time in the game. And here's the key part, get leverage. If you can get leverage and play with a lead in this game and create separation, that's going to be the difference maker. Now, the separation point within that, to me, could be 4th down. Because Texas, man, Steve Sarkisian is going to stick to his guns. If he's rolling the dice in Tuscaloosa, Alabama in week 2 of the college football season and going for it on 4th down, he's not changing his tune in New Orleans against Washington. He's not. So they're going to go for it on 4th down a fair amount, and that might be the difference maker in this game. When they're aggressive and they try and push the envelope and try and pick up that 4th down on the 40-yard line going in, if they get that and extend drives, maybe they're able to create separation that way, probably advantage Texas. Now, if not, if they give it back to Michael Penix Jr. in Washington, they're probably scoring points. And you're saying, man, we had an empty possession there. We can't have that. Cannot have that. Probably also a thing where you got to get 7 instead of 3. Should go without saying. Washington was the better football team a season ago. Look at that box score. Texas ran the football just over 100 yards. I don't think that happens again. I don't think Texas has that kind of output on the ground. I think Quinn Ewers is much more poised. Washington fans have said it all season long, JD, pick against us. Every time you pick against us, we win. It's actually not 100% true. I picked y'all to beat USC, and you did, so we'll kind of throw that one in the win column for us. Also, I'm from Issaquah. Right? I got no hate for the Huskies, brother. I was born not too far from where Washington actually is, where the University of Washington actually is. Even with that being said, I think being multiple in a football game like this is the difference maker. I think the Texas run defense is going to hold up their end of the bargain. And I think that the Texas ability to be multiple, getting downhill, running the football, and also being able to have too many weapons for Washington to deal with is going to be the difference maker. So I think it's close. Again, we like the over in this one. We'll take Texas. Final score 37-33 in Nollins. Sets up an Alabama-Texas rematch from where we're standing. But if you're Steve Sarkisian, man, at this point you have put something together, getting to the national championship game that nobody can argue with. Nobody can say anything about what Steve Sarkisian and Texas did previous seasons, because at this point it's worked. You've built to this point. You got yourself in that football game. So if I'm Texas, I feel good enough about my chances, and if that confetti drops in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl, vibes are high. And I think at that point you kind of drop the mic on all the, well, this Texas isn't this and they're not that. Like all those old narratives at that point, they're dead. They're very much dead. We don't do the whole Texas is back thing. But again, at this point, Texas will have very much so arrived. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.